You know how sometimes a game shows up on your radar and you can't quite figure out where you stand on it? The trailers look great, the concept sounds interesting, but something about the whole thing just feels kinda off. In the age of FromSoft, everyone wants to have the next great action-adventure game, the next Soulslike. That's where I've been with the Relic the First Guardian for the last few weeks. Launches on July 31st, that's a couple days from when this video goes up, and the previews that dropped painted a picture that I'd describe as complicated. IGN spent some time with it, said some intriguing things. They also gave it a 4, basically stating that it's kind of broken. DualShockers liked it a bit more, gave it a 5. Mostly due to performance problems and other things, but there is something about the trailers and the whole aesthetic that just keeps pulling me in. And somewhere in the middle of all of that is a game asking $50 from you at launch. There's something there, something I can't quite put my finger on, and some of its ideas sound a lot more interesting than I expected. The main question is whether any of that actually holds up. So what is this game exactly? Relic the First Guardian takes place in Arsiltis, a world that collapsed after the Great Relic was shattered and the void spread across the land. You play as a First Guardian, collecting pieces of that relic while moving through ruined villages, forests, caves, and settlements that have been left to the monsters and the few people still trying to survive. The larger setup is familiar dark fantasy territory, but the smaller stories are supposed to give the game more personality. The creative director describes the world as an old folktale passed from a grandfather to a child, and a lot of previews lean into that idea through memories left behind by ordinary people. You find burned letters, abandoned objects, fragments of conversations, and traces of families that were already falling apart before the Guardian arrived. IGN's hand-on preview described an early scene where the player reaches a burning house, breaks through some debris, and finds a woman trapped inside. But the rescue comes a little bit too late. You then have a sort of detective vision where you kind of check the glowing objects around the room, and that helps you fill out what happened to the family. These moments are fully voiced so you can follow the story while moving through the environment instead of stopping to read every scrap of lore. Or at least that would be the case, but from looking at previews from people outside the official media, there's a big disconnect there. These notes, they look like they pop up every couple of minutes and really take you out of what the game is supposed to be doing, which is focusing on the actual gameplay and combat. Also, I'm pretty sure it's all an AI mishmash of strange translations and weird fake accents. The cadence and pronunciation of a lot of things just sound off.
If you meet someone on the road who needs help, don't just pass them by. A fragment of the Great Relic might be there, yes, but even if it's not, they'll need your hand. That's who you are after all. Wherever help was needed, you always answered the call. That village.
And well, it seems like you follow these event trails and they help you explore an area and flesh out the local stories. One's about a sick man that takes a cure and turns him into a monster, another about a deadbeat dad, these sort of short stories that end in tragedy. But again, they all felt like someone prompted ChatGPT with, "Give me 5 sappy stories about people dying, medieval times." I'm not so sure about these to be honest, but maybe they get better as you move forward in the game. Now, the world itself is described as being semi-open, with focused areas that branch away from a central route. That sounds like a good fit for a game built around dozens of bosses and so many story points. Lots of open worlds tend to suffer from having enormous empty stretches of nothing, but that isn't even my biggest concern so far. It's actually the combat. So breaking it down a bit, attacking does not use stamina, while blocking and dodging still do. Skills run on cooldowns, so there is no mana bar forcing you to save every useful ability for a boss. They want players to stay active, use their weapon skills often, and treat stamina as the resource that keeps them alive. I like the idea on paper because it changes what the green bar means during a fight. You can keep attacking when an opening appears, but a reckless block or panic dodge can leave you with nothing when the next hit comes in. I'm not sure if I'm entirely happy about it. I think you either do or you don't with these types of things. Mortal Shell 2 is a good example of this. They decided to remove stamina altogether, and I think the demo was better for it. The part that will definitely catch veteran Souls players off guard is the speed. They've got some flashy skills and quick dagger attacks, but the basic movement shown in the previews has a heavier feel. Swings take time, you have to commit to dodges, and you can't really cancel out of animations once you start attacking. Some people even mentioned that this was a sort of throwback to the early Dark Souls style, but heavier and clunkier, I guess. Maybe even like Lords of the Fallen 2014, which is not exactly the most stellar comparison. I do think that'll be up to every player, but who knows? Players coming from Sekiro, Lies of P, or faster action games might feel like it's a bit too sluggish. The weapon selection is pretty small. There are 5 weapon types, including sword and shield, a two-handed weapon, a battle staff, daggers, and a longsword. The footage shows a wide gap between rapid dagger combos and the slower attacks from heavier weapons. You also use magic and can combo them into normal attacks. Everything is on a cooldown, which reminds me a bit of a mobile game. Not sure how I feel about that either. Definitely looks a bit too button mashy, but I guess they're putting all of their eggs in one basket with their emphasis on boss fights. When a game promises more than 70 of them, they better be good. The bosses, called Brutals, are meant to have both a mechanical idea and a personal story. They're former soldiers, villagers, parents, and people whose fear or hunger twisted them into something else. Defeating them gives you more than a reward screen because the fight also closes the story you've been following through the area. One boss named Bronco the Bloodstained Shield is the clearest example of how the developers want these encounters to work, and that's not exactly a good thing. Well, he fights inside a burning chapel with large axe and shield, and trying to absorb his full attack string drains your stamina before you can respond. Here, you have to rely on parrying and breaking his stance, since they leave no room for you to do much else. My opinion, I felt like the player was fighting the camera more than the boss, just way too tight over the player character. Then you get a big boy, Entom the Starved. He charges at you and leaps into the air to attack. You can't block those either. So the fight becomes about moving to the side, getting a few hits in when an opening appears, and getting out before he turns around. There were a few more bosses, each with their own backstory that you find throughout the different areas. My issue with all of this is consistency. Since there's no stamina, bosses just kinda teleport on top of you and lots of attacks are difficult to read. The camera, geez, that's the biggest issue for me. When the warning for a dangerous move depends on seeing the boss clearly, losing starts falling into the cheap territory. 70 plus bosses sounds great in a trailer, they can all look epic and awesome and all of the adjectives, but if the combat and camera are off, then you're basically screwed. Although, the reward for beating them may end up being what keeps people interested. Relic has built its entire progression system around what you discover and take from the world. It doesn't have a traditional character level system. There are no souls to recover after death and no screen where you keep raising strength or dex. Your power comes from the relics, weapons, armor, and upgrades you collect while exploring. Bosses can drop relics with passive effects, and you unlock more slots as the game continues. The fat boy boss Entom dropped an item that restores health after each kill. Another drops a shroud that improves stamina and reduces cooldowns. Those bonuses are tied to who you fight, so your build will be directly connected to which bosses you take on. The equipment follows the same idea. Each weapon and armor piece exists once in the world, with its own name and history. Upgrading weapons unlocks new attacks and passive bonuses through their skill trees. One two-handed skill, for example, Cataclysm Thunder, launches your character into the air before dropping back down for massive damage. Between 5 weapon types, the relics you equip, and the skill trees attached to each weapon, there should be enough room to reshape a build without starting a new character every time you want to experiment with something. Now, exploration, as simple as it seems, does feed into progression. A character you meet can increase your health, the boss can give you a relic that changes how you recover, and the hidden weapon can open up another combat style. The game gives you a reason to follow those side paths beyond just finding another crafting material. So I do like that they're trying to connect it all. I just hope the launch version is polished enough for these ideas to come through without the rough edges getting in the way. So like I've mentioned, there are a few things I would wait to see. Like I said, the camera is the first issue I would watch after release. Large bosses, tight arenas, and a committed combat system can be a rough combination when the player can't see the next attack. Getting pushed into a corner and losing sight of the boss worries me more than a short parry window because practice cannot fix a shitty camera. Then we have that heavy feeling combat. The devs chose a slower style, and that choice can work. The problem begins when an animation, input, or enemy cue makes the player feel disconnected from what's happening. Boss consistency is another concern because the game has built so much of its identity around them. How long before they all just become copies of each other? How many repeat attacks with a different character model? And it's probably safe to say to keep clear of playing on Steam Deck. I don't think it'll hold up. However, the devs are a small studio releasing its first title, and they've said their priority is stable gameplay and responsive combat. They have about a day or two to fix those things. And at $50, I'd wait at least 2 or 3 days after release before considering getting it, or wait for a sale. I think a good price would have been around 10 or 15 to be honest. So, where am I with the game? After going through everything, I understand why the Relic First Guardian has been hard for me to place. The game is doing lots of things I like on paper. You know, the idea behind having more intimate stories connected to progression and exploration sounds so interesting, but I think they failed on the execution. Maybe if the heavy combat settles into a rhythm and the camera holds up, the rest of the game could be fun. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so sure to be honest. Also, all the AI you see all over the place really drags down the experience. I do want to see how the final build handles the camera, how the combat feels across different weapons, and whether the boss quality improves at all in later parts of the game. So it caught my attention because of its ideas, but what about you? Where are you at with this one? Are the stories, relics, and boss designs enough to make you take the chance on day one, or are you waiting to see how it performs once people have the final build? Let me know. I think that's all from me for now. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and have a great one.
There are memories left behind in this world, and sometimes there are confessions that are never spoken in time. But this is only one of many stories left behind in this world.